So before we go through anything, I want to go through my tiers because I think that the tiers are very important, and they elaborate on something very important in that none of these are going to be bad. A lot of tier lists will list, like, oh, S tier, A tier, and then down like an F tier. This is terrible. Inherently, none of these years can be bad because these are the best years that have happened in MMA history. So none of them are going to be bad. There are some that are fine, but to keep that in context, it's fine for this list. Someone who's on this list inherently had one of the 5 best years in a year ever. And another thing that you'll notice is that if you look at all of these names, some of them are highlighted in yellow. Those are people who I think had the best year, who I would call the fighter of the year. But fighter of the year in a bad year is not going to be as good as someone who isn't fighter of the year in an amazing all-time year. So that's what this is for. We might add tiers as we go. In fact, I know we're going to add tiers as we go, but this is what I've got. And I accrued this list based on the video that I made, the fighter of the year every year between 1993 and 2021. Now, I had to come up with some in 2022, 2023, so it might not be entirely comprehensive, but I think that this is going to be more in-depth than anybody else is going to give you. And I might have forgot some names, but I don't think that I did. So if I did, let me know. I'll tell you where it goes. So we're going to go like in chronological order because that makes sense. Sure. So we start with 1993. The only person who is listed in 1993 is Royce Gracie, and that's because he's really the only person who we can go off of because 1993 is a very truncated year. His only competition really was Ken Shamrock, who beat Masakatsu Funaki at the first Pancrase events, and Pancrase ran more events, but they were very scattershot. Meanwhile, Royce was the only one who beat Ken Shamrock. It's the only really great win to be had in 1993. I think that Royce is fine for this list, only because it's based on such a small sample size. This might change, but this is like a technicality. 1993 maybe shouldn't even count because it literally is just UFC 1, but you have to have something in 1993 or else. Then we go into 1994, much better year for mixed martial arts. We start with Masakatsu Funaki, who had an incredibly good run. He lost to Jason DeLucia in a major upset earlier in the year and was kind of separated from the 4 pillars of Pancrase, being Bas Rutten, Ken Shamrock, Masakatsu Funaki himself, and Minoru Suzuki. He didn't fight any of them until, I believe, June. I think that he beat Bas Rutten in 1993, but in 1994, as those guys were starting to get wins on each other, Suzuki beat Ken Shamrock beat Bas beat Suzuki. They had a little triangle going on. Funaki was separate from them, and then Funaki beat Suzuki and beat Shamrock and ended up getting what was essentially the first seed in the King of Pancrase tournament. I think 1994 is a good year. I don't think it's great. Funaki had a great 1994. Becoming the first person to beat Suzuki, Ken, and Bas is super impressive. Because I don't think anybody else ever really had that. Bas never beat Ken never beat Suzuki, and Suzuki didn't beat Funaki. So only person to hold wins over those 3. Great job. Royce 1994, I have to add another tier. Only guy doing it big where he's at. Royce in 1994, he won UFC 2, which sucked, and he won UFC 4, which sucked. He didn't win UFC 3 because he pulled out injured after he fought chemo. And the only win that he accrued in like 9 fights was Dan Severn at UFC 4. And it was boring as hell, and Dan Severn wasn't like an established guy. He was a great amateur wrestler. He was the NWA world champion, I think. Royce was so separated from the rest of MMA, being Pancrase, that he was just kind of the only guy doing it big where he's at. It's not even fine. It's just he has to be mentioned because he wasn't losing. But He's the only guy doing it big where he's at. Then there's the fighter of the year for 1994, Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock's 1994 is elite. You look up his win list, he gathers a ton of wins. He loses to Minoru Suzuki and Masakatsu Funaki, but then he beats Boss. He goes into the King of Pancrase tournament. He beats Funaki. He beats Minobu Yamada. He becomes the first King of Pancrase. Ken's 1994 is elite. It's probably the year for Fighter of the Year where the guy has the most fights, because that's just what you did in the early 90s. But Ken's 1994 rules. You should go look up the King of Pancrase tournaments. Don't watch Ken's fights. They're really long and really bad. Then we go into 1995. We start with Boss Rutan. Boss is probably the only guy who, like, he's held back by one loss, and it was the last loss that he got in his career, which was to Ken Shamrock. Boss's win list in 1995 is absurd. He beats Minobu Yamada, Takeaki Fuke, Maurice Smith, Jason DeLucia, Frank Shamrock, Minoru Suzuki, Maurice Smith again, and Ryushi Yanagisawa. And only that loss to Ken Shamrock keeps him from being the best fighter of the year. He's absolutely elite. 1995 is such a tough year because so many things are happening, and Boss is absolutely at the front of it. Is it better than Ken's 1994? Yes, because he only had one loss. And better wins, I think. Dan Severn's 1995. He loses to Ken, and then he wins the Ultimate Tournament. I think he wins the UFC 5 tournament and the Ultimate Tournament, beats Oleg Taktarov. Severn's 1995 is really good. I think it's actually great, but again, he did lose to Ken, so it has to filter up somewhere. But I think that Severn is beating lesser competition than Funaki in 1994. Suzuki's 1995 is weird, because Suzuki's 1995, he loses to Frank Shamrock, he loses to Boss Rutan, but he also beats Ken Shamrock in a fight that a lot of people say is fixed. I don't know. I wasn't there. We're going to assume that all of the Pancrase results are legitimate, because I don't think that Ken Shamrock would lie to me. So Suzuki's 1995, he did beat Ken Shamrock. He's the only guy to beat Ken Shamrock. But he did lose to Frank, and he did lose to Boss. I think his year is good, because outside of that Ken win, he doesn't really have a lot going on. But, he beats Baby Guy Mezger. He beats Jason DeLucia. The fact that Suzuki has one of these years, I don't think a lot of people know that. They know he was in Pancrase, and he was hot. 1995 Minoru Suzuki deserves a shout. If you believe that the Ken fight is fake, that's fine. I understand. Ken 1995 is god tier. Beats Boss easily. Beats Severn easily. Has some shitter fights with Hoist, and I think that he has a shitter fight with Oleg. But this isn't an exciting fighter tier list. This is a best years tier list. And Ken 1995 is unparalleled. He has a loss to Suzuki, but he beats Boss and Dan Severn, who have two of the best years that are going to be on this list, I think. All right, so going into 1996, we start with Yuki Kondo. Yuki Kondo's 1996 is really interesting because he debuts in 1996. And he starts off, he starts really hot. He beats Minoru Suzuki, beats future guy Semi Schilt. He beats Pete Williams, who's one of Ken's boys. He beats Frank Shamrock. And then he loses 3 straight to DeLucia, Funaki, and Guy Mezger. There was a thing called the Neo Blood tournament, which is like a Pancrase, new guy tournament. Yuki Kondo entered the tournament after he'd already beaten Minoru Suzuki, who is just coming off of being King of Pancrase. So Yuki Kondo starts the year really well. He ends up losing at the end, but he's knocked out Frank Shamrock, which Boss Rutan hasn't really been able to do in 2 attempts. I think Kondo's 1996, I think it's great. This might drop down to good, but beating Minoru Suzuki and and knocking out Frank Shamrock in a fight that's great, by the way. You should watch Frank Shamrock, Yuki Kondo at the 1996 Pancrase anniversary show. But that fight rules, and that knockout is so good. Coleman 1996, I think that it's fine for this list because the UFC doesn't really have a lot of things going for it right now. Dan Severn ends up beating Ken Shamrock for the Super Fight Championship in one of the worst fights that has ever existed. But he's not entering tournaments because he won the Ultimate, so he's going to go be the champion. Coleman wins, I think, 2 tournaments, but his only real win is Don Fry, and the only reason why Don Fry is a win is because he also won a tournament. I don't know. I think that Coleman's year is like, it's good because he's undefeated. He's a young, hard-charging guy. But winning the UFC 10 and UFC 11 tournaments is like, okay, that's cool, man. What's the UFC got going on? Oh, nothing? That's cool, dude. Dan Severn, he really genuinely might be the only guy doing it big where he's at, even though Coleman is also on the list. Because Severn... we're adding another tier. He got 1 win, and it kind of sucked, but you have to acknowledge it. Dan Severn was the guy who beat UFC Ken Shamrock, and the fight sucked, and the win kind of sucks, and even though he won, he was never regarded as the best fighter in the world. But he did get the win, and you have to acknowledge it, because it is historically significant. It's just more significant for being like the worst fight that's ever happened. Then we get to Boss 1996. Boss 1996... all the way up here, and it's better than Ken's. Boss Rutan is a guy that I actually think is kind of overrated all time because he's such like a charming personality. He did the commentary. He's made those street fight videos, which are all fun. And then you look at his record, and it's like 70 fights in a row that he's won. I actually think he's a little overrated. He's not overrated in 1995 and 1996. 95-96 Boss is as good as anybody has ever been. Because 1996, obviously, he goes undefeated. His last loss was to Ken Shamrock in 1995. But 1996, his win list is Guy Mezger, Frank Shamrock in the trilogy bout, Jason DeLucia, Matsukazu Funaki, Minobu Yamada. It's an insane run that has maybe never been done since. There are better years than Boss 1996, but between 95 and 96, there's an argument that there hasn't been a better 2-year run, even with Ken 1994-1995 being the fighter of the year back-to-back. Going into 1997, we start with Masakatsu Funaki, who 96 Boss Rutan kind of gave way to. He was very injured, very inactive, not fighting good fighters after 1996. He fought guys, but eventually he vacated the King of Pancrase Championship, and Funaki ended up picking it up. He beat Yuki Kondo. I believe that he beat Guy Mezger in 1997. So Funaki was the best, available guy in Pancrase. It's just that Pancrase was declining. Ken was gone. Frank was gone. Boss was there, but he wasn't active. So, 1997, he beats Semi Schilt, Yuki Kondo, Guy Mezger, loses to Yuki Kondo, but he has a good run, and I like his 1997. There's good stories that are being told. After he loses to Yuki Kondo, he faces Guy Mezger at the anniversary show, and then he faces Jason Gotze, who had upset Yuki Kondo, going into the bout in December with Kondo, where he wins the title back. I like Funaki's 1997. It's just Pancrase is starting to diminish a lot. Meanwhile, Guy Mezger 1997, the reason why he has a good 1997, even though he lost to Funaki, is that he was having a good 1997 and also going over to the UFC. UFC 1997 is when they introduced weight classes. So they had a lightweight tournament, which just meant below 200 pounds, that Guy Mezger won, getting a win that would eventually become good against Tito Ortiz. He beats Semi Schilt. He has a good run. His only losses are to Funaki and Yuki Kondo. I think that I put him in good. I remember his year being better when I was writing this, but he is below Funaki. And I think Funaki actually has a better year than that. Because Coleman's 1996, it sucks. Coleman really should be down and only guy doing it big where he's at, huh? Then we get to Randy Couture, 1997. Randy Couture in 1997 is one of the most, like, trim the fat years ever. He debuts, he beats 2 nobodies to win the UFC tournament. Then he has a number 1 contender match against Vitor Belfort, and then he wins the title against Maurice Smith. It's just like tournament, number 1 contender, title. It's very clear, very concise, 4-0. I think that he is suffering by not beating great competition. Maurice Smith had beaten Mark Coleman. He beat Vitor Belfort, who'd won the UFC tournament by knocking out Tank Abbott. So I think that Couture is in... It's a great year. And it's better than Kondo's because he doesn't have... Because Kondo had the 3 losses at the end, but he had more fights. Couture really suffers in 1997 because the UFC just has no prestige. Pancrase is really suffering at this point. So they're coasting off of prestige while the UFC is like starting to build back up after Hoist and Ken left. And like Severn lost at the start of 1997 to Mark Coleman. So he's gone. And then Coleman gets upset. So they just don't really have shit. 1998 is a weird year. If 1997 is the start of the weird years, is like start of like both companies are kind of like really declining. 1998 is where it's really clear, hey man, this whole shit kind of sucks. 1998, I gave Dan Henderson a mention in the video that I made because he had like no one was really doing anything. Like Dan Henderson, it was like it's a bad year. It's just outright. It's just a bad year where Dan Henderson beats Alan Goes and Carlos Newton. Good wins to win a UFC tournament. But that's it, and that's one of the most notable runs of the year. Because it was such a weird year, I gave it like a split Fighter of the Year. Realistically, Fighter of the Year should be Guy Mezger. I shouldn't have split this, but like Frank Shamrock went, I believe he went undefeated on the year. Yeah, 1998, he became the UFC champion at the end of 97 and went 3-0. Igor Zinoviev, Jeremy Horn, which is a god-awful fight, and avenges his loss to John Lober. This is like an abhorrent year. This shouldn't be Fighter of the Year split with Guy Mezger. Like, this is UFC bias on my part, and I really tried to avoid that. But Guy Mezger ate a loss to Semi Schilt, and for some reason, I just equated that. But he did beat Masakatsu Funaki and Yuki Kondo in 1998. And he has that loss to Semi Schilt. Semi Schilt should also be here, but I think that he lost to Yuki Kondo as well. I should have added Semi Schilt. That's my bad. But Mezger is like, it's a bad year. But he does like, he's actually the only guy doing it big where he's at. But Semi Schilt's also in Pancrase. Semi Schilt has a win over Mezger, gets a win over Masakatsu Funaki, is like kind of the best fighter in the world at that time. But I forgot to add Semi Schilt. Semi Schilt in 1998 is a very good fighter and should be on the list. But I forgot to add him because I'm dumb. Going into 1999, which is probably one of the worst years in MMA history. There are some good things happening. Igor Vovchanchyn debuts for Pride. He already kind of had like a mythical status. He has kind of some weird fights to start. I think that's when he faced Akira Shoji, and that's when he faced Gary Goodridge. It wasn't very good. But 1999, he gets the Mark Kerr win, which went down in the record book as a no contest, which is bullshit. But at that point, Igor was probably the best fighter in the world. And he gets his like signature knockout against Francisco Bueno, which you can Google that. That's the Falling Man. One of the best knockouts that has ever existed. Igor 1999 is a good year. I don't think it's great because he's fighting in Pride and there aren't a lot of great fighters in Pride in 1999. I think that Igor beating Kerr and beating Bueno in the way that he did is extremely significant. Boss 1999 is when he goes back to fighting like good fighters because he went over to the UFC and they held a tournament that they rigged to try to get him to win it. So he goes to the UFC and faces Tsuyoshi Kosaka, a fight that they rig so that he ends up winning. And then he faces Kevin Randleman in a fight that he gets the shit beat out of him for 21 minutes, and then they raise his hand so that now Bas Rutten is a UFC heavyweight champion who never lost the belt. So I don't know what to do with Bas because he has 2 hoax wins, but they are 2 wins. Like, if he got the random win legitimate, he would have been probably in fine for this list. But you know what? Bas 1999 is a hoax of the people because forever you have to see his huge record. He has this huge record that ends in 1999, and then he has that random fight against Warpath in 2006. So people get to look at it and be like, wow, he was undefeated from 1995 to 2006. It's like, well, no, check the dates, you stupid bastard. Bas 1999 is absolutely a hoax of the people. Randleman's there too. But he's like the victim of the hoax of the people. Because if Randleman wins in 1999, if he gets that Bas Rutten win, he is kind of a much more legitimate heavyweight champion. Afterwards, I believe he beat Pete Williams to become the UFC champion in a dog trash fight. That fight's terrible. But again, we're not rating people based on good wins. He beat Maurice Smith. He beat Pete Williams to win the UFC title afterwards, but lost to Bas Rutten. If he had beaten Bas and like defended against Pete Williams, he'd probably be there in the good tier because he did get that win over Bas. But 1999 is an abhorrent year for everybody except for Frank Shamrock and Kazushi Sakuraba. Because Frank Shamrock in 1999, I think he only has 2 fights. That's a draw with Kiyoshi Tamura over in Rings, who's not present on this list because Rings becomes real in 1999, but 2000, like King of Kings era, is when they really start cooking. But he has a draw against Tamura in Japan, and then comes back and has one of the best fights and wins ever against Tito Ortiz, and then retires on the spot. He's the only guy doing it big where he's at. Then there's Kazushi Sakuraba in 1999. I did a whole video documenting Kazushi Sakuraba and his rise to prominence. 1999 is really when he puts it all together. He beats Vitor Belfort. Amazing fight. You should go watch it. Beats Royler Gracie. Becomes the first person to beat a Gracie in mixed martial arts. Sakuraba's 1999. It's a great year. He goes undefeated. Those are his only 2, I think, notable wins. He fought on like every Pride card because that's just what you did. But those are 2 very good wins. Vitor is a very good fighter, and Royler Gracie, even though Sakuraba was way bigger than him and he wasn't like a huge MMA guy, still a Gracie. No one had ever beaten a Gracie in MMA. I promise it's relevant. Then we get to 2000. If 1998 and 1999 are like, we are so over, 2000 is we are so back. 2000 rules. One of the best years in MMA history. Start with Mark Coleman. Coleman has a career resurgence because he had such a dour 97, 98, 99. It's genuinely sad. But 2000, he goes back to being the best heavyweight in the world by beating Igor Vovchanchyn, winning the Pride Openweight Grand Prix, unifying the UFC 1 and UFC Heavyweight lineal championships in something that only matters to dorks, but is also kind of like an interesting tidbit. I don't think he has like an amazing win list outside of that. He beat Akira Shoji. If he had beaten Kazuyuki Fujita instead of forfeiting to him, that would have been better. But I don't know. I think that Coleman's year is good because he gets back to that spot that he was in 1996, but is like, he's clearly a lot more flawed now, but he bounced back, and you have to admire a bounce back. So I think it is good. It's above these fine ones. Dan Henderson 2000. Oh, that is a great year. I love Dan Henderson's 2000. He wins the 1999 King of Kings tournament, beats Babalu Sabral, Kiyoshi Tamura, and Big Nog. He beats Gilbert Yvel as well. Gilbert Yvel coming off of the knockout of Semi Schiltz in Hoax Rules. Dan Henderson had have beaten Vanderlei, or if Vanderlei had gotten a win over Tito Ortiz, they wouldn't be fighter of the year, but they would be up here in elite because those are, the wins are canceling each other out. I mentioned Sakurai in my video. He's the only guy doing it big where he's at, because Sakurai had like stumbled into this super elite looking record. It's why you have to kind of know context. He was a guy over in Shudo. He was a welterweight guy, 168. He's like 18-0 at this point, but he had never beaten anybody because that division stinks. But 2000, he actually starts beating good fighters. He beats Luis Azeredo and Frank Trigg. I thought it was good to note Sakurai because he is like a legend, but he's a legend over in the dark reaches of Shudo, which nobody should count. Vanderlei Silva's 2000 is like one of the great years. Vanderlei Silva is a guy who he had started fighting in Brazil, Vale Tudo, and went to the UFC, got knocked out by Vitor Belfort in 98. 99, he has some fights in Pride, and they're not very good. He kind of just doesn't really put it together. 2000, he faces Tito for the vacant UFC championship. That fight stinks. But after he loses to Tito, he goes back to Japan and knocks out Guy Mezger. He gets like his first like real knockout in Pride against Guy Mezger, and then faces Dan Henderson in kind of an unsung great fight. He has a really, really good 2000. If he had beaten Tito Ortiz and was the UFC light heavyweight champion, he might not have faced Guy Mezger and Dan Henderson. But if he'd gotten that win, he would have been up here in elite. And then there's Sakuraba's 2000, which Sakuraba's 2000, it literally cannot be beaten because the reason why MMA exists and isn't terrible is because of Sakuraba in 2000. Like everything that came in the modern age of MMA, it can be pinpointed to Sakuraba beating Royce Gracie. It's a cultural reset. It changes everything. Genuinely. So 2000, really great year. Follows up with another really great year. It's just a very different year. Couture 2001. Since 1997, Couture's been bumming it in Japan, losing to Enson Inoue in 98. Goes into rings, loses to Valentine Overeem. No. He doesn't lose to Valentine Overeem yet. I think he loses to Valentine Overeem actually in 2001. He loses to Mikhail Ilyukin, which is worse. But Couture does go back to the UFC, has an all-time classic with Pedro Hizzo, and then another fight that's okay. I think that 2001, Randy Couture, he's the kind of the only guy doing it big where he's at. Because that first Hizzo fight is a classic. And it comes off of... He also beats Kevin Randleman. The Kevin Randleman fight's really good. The UFC had so many bad years at heavyweight. Like, Randy Couture left as champion, a lot of contract issues. It goes into limbo until 1999. They run a fraudulent tournament that Boss Rutan wins. Boss Rutan never defends the championship. Kevin Randleman wins against Pete Williams, has an okay fight against Pete Williams that actually isn't very good, then has one of the worst fights ever against Pedro Hizzo. And then Randy Couture comes back, and everything's good. Yay! Dan Henderson's 2001 is fine for the list. Because he's in Japan, he has his Renzo Gracie knockouts. He has his Renzo Gracie knockout is honestly carrying a lot of this. He also knocks out Akira Shoji, has his robbery win over Ninja. I think his 2001's good. It's just like his 2000 and his 2001 are really strong years with that Vanderlei loss in the middle. He's on a really great run. He's not like transcending into that next space. Matt Hughes' 2001 is it better than Funaki and Mezger? Yeah. 2001 Matt Hughes, he loses to Pele at the start of the year, which what can you do? But he goes from like regional guy to the UFC welterweight champion. That's the year where he beat Carlos Newton. He also beat Hiromitsu Kanehara in Japan. And that's really kind of it. But he makes himself something. This illiterate farm boy goes out and does the damn thing. I like Hughes' 2001. I like his 2002 a little more, but we'll talk about that. Big Nog 2001. That's a great year. Big Nog's 2001 rules. Big Nog in 2001, he wins the 2000 King of Kings tournament because Rings was a very incompetent company who ran their tournament finals and like who ran their tournament finals in the year after. And I guess it's like, oh, it's like sports. No, it isn't. You guys just suck. It was a 2000 King of Kings tournament in 2001. He beats Valentine Overeem in the finals. Valentine Overeem, who had just beat Randy Couture. If Randy Couture could have goddamn beaten Valentine Overeem, we could have gotten Big Nog versus Couture way earlier. But then Nogueira goes over to Pride, where he beats Gary Goodridge, Mark Coleman, and Heath Herring. Nogueira has the reputation of a silly grappler who just gets memed on and then pulls out a meme submission, but he beats the shit out of Heath Herring on the feet, on the ground. 2001, Nogueira is the best fighter alive, and he has a great year. But Vanderlei Silva is the fighter of the year for 2001, even though he, I think, only has 2 notable wins. But they're both over Kazushi Sakuraba, who, at least for the first one, was the best fighter in the world. That first Sakuraba knockout at Pride 13 is absolutely like one of those cultural resets where it's like, oh, you were happy? Not anymore. I don't think it's up here in Elite, but I think it is the top of great, at least for right now, because knocking out Sakuraba the way that he did when Igor Vovchanchyn wasn't able to do it, Vitor Belfort wasn't able to do it, Vanderlei Silva was just on such a different level at that time. I think Vanderlei's 2001 is really good. He's a fighter of the year, but Nogueira is the best fighter. 2002, things are really starting to shape up. I like Matt Hughes' 2002. I think it's a good year. I think it's better than his 2001. For sure. Better than his 2001. 2002, he gets the Sakurai win. He gets the Carlos Newton rematch and ends up winning. I haven't seen the Carlos Newton rematch in a really long time, but I don't remember it much. He also beats Gil Castillo, who is like a dude. I like his 2002. It's not as good as Coleman's 2000, but I liked Matt Hughes' like beginning of his career in the UFC because it was like just weirdly fun, even though the division was kind of barren. Rico Rodriguez 2002. What a treat. No, I don't think there has ever been more of a like 1 year wonder that shouldn't have been than Rico Rodriguez. He was building up a little bit in regional scenes, Rico, in like 2000, 2001. He goes to the UFC in 2001. He beats Andrei Arlovsky and Pete Williams. 2002, he beats Jeff Monson, Tsuyoshi Kosaka, who's still a good fighter, and then beats Randy Couture. Now, the Couture win is a little diminished because Randy Couture had lost to Josh Barnett, who unfortunately tested positive for steroids. Then he faces Randy Couture, doesn't test positive for steroids. Rico going, like after that fight, going into 2003, is 14-1, has wins over a ton of people, and like should have just been the defining heavyweight of that era, but the UFC doesn't get to have nice things. I think it's Rico's 2002, goes 3-0, beats Randy Couture, beats Tsuyoshi Kosaka. I think it's a great year. Fighter of the year, though, is Big Nogueira. I think that his 2002 is actually like a way step down from his 2001. Like he gets the Semi Schilt win. He gets the Dan Henderson win. But the Bob Sapp win is like the legacy one because of the size discrepancy and how he weathered the storm. That's kind of his signature win. It's better than these. I think it's bottom of great. It's not as good as his 2001, but I think that Nogueira's 2001, I'm going to end up putting it higher. I just don't want to reassess it. But Big Nog's 2002 is definitely worse than his 2001. But his 2001 is one of the best years ever. It just got overshadowed by stupid Vanderlei knocking out the best fighter in the world 2 times. 2003, oh my God. You want to talk about one of the best years ever. 2003 is insane. Randy Couture bounces back after going 0-2 in 2002 to beat Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell at light heavyweight for their championships, becoming first person to win UFC championship in 2 weight classes. It's so unfair for Randy Couture to be beating Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz in 2003 and still not be the best light heavyweight on the planet because of what was going on in the sport at the time. He has 2 wins. They're both really good. I think it's only good, though, because there's only 2 wins. Yeah, I think with only 2, that's all you can really put him there. Mirko Cro Cop's 2003. 2002 is when Cro Cop started fighting like actual fights. 03 is when he starts fighting real fighters. He hurts Heath Herring bad. He hurts Igor Vovchanchin bad. He ends the year getting submitted by Nogueira in, again, Unsung Classic. I think he has a good year. Better than Hughes 2001? Yes. Not as good as Hughes 2002, but better than Hughes 2002. Fuck it. I don't rate Hayato Sakurai anyway. Igor Vovchanchin and Heath Herring, knocking those guys out, those are good fighters. Also beat Alberto Del Rio. That's a great little fun fact. Big Nog 2003. Big Nog lost the heavyweight championship. He beat Rico Rodriguez. I think he beat Rico Rodriguez in 03. He beat Cro Cop at the end of the year. I think that his year is a little bit better than Cro Cop's 03, even though he has the loss. But he did beat Cro Cop, and Heath Herring was his kind of sloppy seconds. Big Nog's 03 is pretty good. I like Big Nog's 03, but it kind of has like the big shadow going over it. The Rico win is also a little contentious. Nah. Rampage 2003 is his big breakout year. Has the Kevin Randleman knockout. He has the Chuck Liddell knockout. He has the light heavyweight Grand Prix finals run. Couture got better wins. Rampage got more wins, but he did lose, but he fought more. So his loss to Vanderlei really hurt him in that respect, but Couture's wins are just too good. Vanderlei's 2003. Vanderlei should probably be the fighter of the year for 2003 because he won the middleweight Grand Prix, knocked out Rampage. But his Grand Prix run kind of sucks. If his Grand Prix win was at all better, because Rampage I feel like does have a better run because he has a better year because he does have the Randleman win that he got at Pride 23, and he has the Liddell win. 2003 Vanderlei is like kind of sputtering. He fights Sakuraba, he fights Hidehiko Yoshida, but then he also knocks out Rampage in the finals. It's a year where he wins the Grand Prix and is the best light heavyweight in the world because he hasn't lost in the division in 3 years, and he knocks out Rampage. But Couture and Rampage have better years than him. It's just his accomplishment is really great. Fedor 2003 is like... Fedor gets the... Okay, so Fedor's 2003 is weird. Because 2002 is when he got his Heath Herring win. One of the best wins ever. Puts him through a meat grinder. 2003, Fedor gets the best win ever. In this reviewer's humble opinion. Fedor doesn't really... Like, he has a signature moment later in the year when he faces Fujita, gets wobbled, then goes and kills him. He beats Goodridge, who is better than you'd expect, but I'm not going to make a case for him. He's so carried by that one win, but it's not this Severn tier, but it is one win. It's the best win ever. I got to add another tier. That's him. That's Fedor 2003. Because it is the best win ever. And even if it's not the best win ever, it's like top 3. So you get a top 3 win ever, you have to go there. But 2004, really good year. BJ Penn, this is when he gets his Matt Hughes win. This is when he leaves the UFC, gets the Dwayne Ludwig win. And those were by May. If he had stayed in the UFC, fought, I think he would have fought GSP next. He beats 04 GSP, I think. Or he went to Shudo and fought whoever the fuck they had going on over there in the lightweight, at lightweight. Penn could have been fighter of the year for this year, maybe, because the Hughes and Dwayne Ludwig wins are primo. But if he goes to Shudo, he doesn't get the Dwayne Ludwig wins. Yeah, you know what I mean. But BJ's year is great. I think BJ's year is great. Wins the UFC championship, beats Dwayne Ludwig, and then just kind of like fucks off. But I think it's a great year. Cro Cop's 2004 notably sees him lose to Kevin Randleman in a major upset. But then you look at his record, and he wins like 17 fights in 2004. He was just on a mission to overcome the nightmare that he went through in 2004. He loses, obviously, to Kevin Randleman, and then he just goes back to the lab and he fights 5 more times. He gets the Alexander Emelianenko knockout. He gets the hoax Josh Barnett finish. It's a good year, but I think that with that loss to Kevin Randleman, I think that it is fine for this list. And I think it's top of fine for this list. He does get some good wins. If he'd gotten a more definitive Josh Barnett victory, I think it might be different. But Shmeep. Takanori Gomi 2004, I think is fine. Takanori Gomi, he lost back-to-back fights. Lost the Shudo title in 2003 to Hellboy. Lost a fight with BJ Penn where he got lumped up in Hawaii. And then he goes from there to Pride, where they're starting their Bushido series. Knocks out Jens Pulver, knocks out Crazy Horse. He gets the Ralph Gracie knockout, or Half Gracie. I don't know how you pronounce it. You know how these Brazilians are. He's the Bushido guy. You know what? No, this is a good year. It's just not a lot of like great fighters. I think it's here. I think it is actually. It's not better than Crow Cops, but it is better than Mezger 1996. Because Gomi, he goes like 5-0. He does have the Jens Pulver knockout. He's establishing himself as like the Pride lightweight. It's just there's not a lot of Pride lightweights for this year. Vanderlei 2004. Vanderlei has one of the scariest finishes of all time against Yuki Kondo that Rampage Jackson is sitting ringside for, and you see the most real thing that has ever happened, where Rampage Jackson has a camera on him as Vanderlei Silva is stomping on Yuki Kondo, and Rampage has like 3 seconds, I swear, of the most real eyes that have ever happened, and then he realizes he's on camera and he's going to be fighting Vanderlei Silva, and he's like, yeah, like hyping himself up and like waving him over, like, yeah, let's get this fight started now. But you can't take away like the realness of how frightened that man was by what exactly this terrorist was doing in Japan. But then they had the fight in 2004, and Vanderlei Silva in 2004 is amazing. This is probably his peak year. Like 2000, I think, is a better year for him. But 2004 is when he is at his best. It's just there's a lot of competition in 2000. Fedor 2004, that's a god tier year. Wins the heavyweight Grand Prix at the hardest bracket, beats Mark Coleman, beats Kevin Randleman, beats Naoya Ogawa, who is not as much of a gimme fight as people act, but he is a gimme fight because Fedor's that good. Then beats Nogueira again, and it goes 4-0-1 on the year. It's one of the greatest years ever. I think it's better than Ken 1995. It's not as good as Boss 1996. Just Boss had so many fights. But the fighters that Fedor was beating were better. Like Randleman at the time. Coleman had declined and lost a step. But Nogueira is the best fighter that anybody here has gotten a win over. 2005, for my money, best year that has ever happened in mixed martial arts. Most important year, Ultimate Fighter, Pride becomes so different. K1 starts doing shit. It's a big year. Andrei Arlovsky's 2005. He's the only guy doing it big where he's at. Good Lord, is the UFC so bad. But Andrei Arlovsky is at his peak being hot. I think 2005 is the year where he knocks out Tim Sylvia and then knocks out 2 men. 2 dudes. I think this is when he gets the Paul Buentello and the Justin Eilers wins. He's ascended into being the UFC heavyweight champion. It's a year. It's his best year as a pro. But, oh man, does Andrei Arlovsky's career suck the more you look at it. He was around for a long time. I'll give him that. And oh man, is he hot in 2005. But good God. Good God, is that year bad. Gomi's 2005 is so fucked up. Gomi has such a fucked up 2005 because it's amazing and he's not the fighter of the year. Luis Azeredo, Tetsuya Kawajiri, Hayato Sakurai. The Kawajiri fight is one of those on the short list for one of the best fights ever. Gomi's 2005 is immaculate. He's also one of those that's like kind of a one-year wonder, but his 04 was also good, so you can't really count that. But he falls off pretty fast, but he should have had a longer run, but Gomi's 05 is truly special. Kid Yamamoto. Kid Yamamoto is, I think he's the peak of the only guy doing it big where he's at. Kid Yamamoto is one of those guys that's like, you really have to like do research to get why he's such a big deal. But like from New Year's Eve 2004 to New Year's Eve 2005, he has like one of the most insane relevance runs because he has the Masato fight, the kickboxing fight at the end of 2004. New Year's Eve should count it for 2005, but that's in kickboxing. And then he wins the Heroes Lightweight Grand Prix, where he doesn't beat amazing fighters, but Genki Sudo and Kawal Uno are very good. They just aren't, you know, gigantic figures. He is the only guy doing it big where he's at, but it's a very special year. Yeah, it's a very special year. Shogun 2005, if you ask me, which you are by clicking on this video, you've gotten this far. Shogun 2005 is the best year that has ever happened that's not Sakuraba. Sakuraba is like sacrosanct. Shogun 2005, I've thought about making this video probably 150 times over the years. And I just got bored by the idea because you have to do, like, there are 2 years that you have to mention as the best years. One of them is Shogun 2005. Weirdly, Sakuraba 2000 is not one of those. But Shogun 2005, it's like, well, the video has to end with Shogun 2005. And I feel like everybody's heard Shogun 2005 is the best year in MMA history. There's really just nothing else to say. He breaks into relevance. He goes like 6-0 on the year. I believe this is the year that 04, he beat Akira Shoji and Hiromitsu Kanehara. 2005, he goes into the Pride Middleweight Grand Prix, knocks out Rampage round 1, has Fight of the Year with Little Nog round 2. Round 3, beats Alistair Overeem. Round 4, knocks out Ricardo Arona, who just gotten off of a win over Vanderlei Silva. It's the best year that's ever happened, and he's like, if there's a Hall of Fame, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer off of 05. Going into 06, sport kind of gets a little different because Pride starts to really decline, but the UFC is starting to tick up. So we see Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva has the Tony Strickland win, you know, that big reverse elbow. Goes to the UFC, kills Chris Lieben, who was like 15-1. He wasn't a top guy, but the middleweight division's so bad. But Lieben's a solid guy. And then Rich Franklin. Great win. Great year. It's a good year, though. Josh Barnett, 2006. Barnett is like cursed to only lose to Mirko Cro Cop. Because this year, he got his Nogueira win. And the Nogueira win is the second best win you could possibly get. He got the Mark Hunt win. Mark Hunt had just beaten Cro Cop at the end of 2005. He gets the Nogueira win. He got the Alexander Emelianenko win, which, yeah. If he'd beaten Cro Cop, he's easily Fighter of the Year. But I think this is just a good year. Liddell 2006, this is the best year of Liddell's career. He gets 3 knockouts. He has the Randy Couture rubber match. He gets Babalu and he gets Tito. I think this is also a good year. It's bordering on great. It is great. No, you know what? It is great. It's not as good as Vanderlei 2004. Vanderlei 2004 is fucked up. Big Nog 2006. Nogueira lost to Barnett. He also got the Barnett win back. He has a solid little year in 2006. I think it might just be fine though. No, this is a mid-year. This is fine for this list. It's just Big Nog has wins, and he only lost to Josh Barnett. But yeah, Tim Sylvia 2006. It's like Arlovsky in 2005. He's the only guy doing it big. His year is better than Arlovsky's 2005. He beats Arlovsky 2 times. He beats Jeff Monson. It's his best career year. I think it's actually a bordering on a good year. It's just you know what? No, it's a good year. It's fine for this list. It's just the UFC sucks so bad that it really drags him down. But he did beat Arlovsky twice. Meanwhile, Arlovsky beat Justin Eilers and Paul Buentello. Cro Cop's 2006, not as good as you'd think. I think it's here. Barnett losing to Cro Cop. He's going to be above Barnett, but they're going to be right close to each other. Because Cro Cop beats Vanderlei in a fight that a lot of people credit for Vanderlei's decline. I don't agree. And then he beats Barnett. Barnett had a better run, beat Mark Hunt, beat Alex, who Cro Cop killed in 03, but whatever. In 04. But Barnett got the Nogueira win. If Cro Cop gets the Nogueira win, it's up here in God or Elite tier. Yeah, it's Cro Cop's best year by a mile, but it's not as good as it should be. Because he does win the Pride Upperweight Grand Prix, does beat Josh Barnett, but Nogueira's win principles don't really translate to Josh Barnett just because Josh Barnett wins. 2007 is a really good year. Pride starts to go away, so I can't really do the whole like only good in the UFC. It's like, boo. Oh, I don't want to talk about the UFC. Anderson's 2007 is good. I don't think it's great. This is the year he beats Luter, he beats Nate Marquardt, he beats Rich Franklin in the rematch. I don't think it's amazing. It's a good year, though. He's clearly one of the best fighters in the world, but it's ramping up. He's had a bunch of these in a row. Like, it was like 06, 07, he's been doing really good. Randy Couture 2007. Oh, man. I think he only had 2 fights, but that was a great year. He got that Tim Sylvia win. He got that Gabriel Gonzaga win. Joe Rogan says that man is his hero. It's in here and great. I love Randy Couture 2007. Rampage 2007, though, elite. Love Rampage 2007. Rampage was in such a shit spot in 06. Like 05, he loses to Shogun. He has a terrible fight with... I don't remember his name. It was Dooho Choi, I think. It was the Korean. It was the token Korean that Pride had in their division. Has a terrible fight. Then he has like a depression afro. He leaves the company, goes and fights Matt Lindland in WFA. 2007, he fights Marvin Eastman, knocks him out. One of the best knockouts ever. I think 2007 is also when he gets the Dan Henderson win. Yes. Dan Henderson fight, Dan Henderson versus Rampage, one of the best fights ever. Anybody who hasn't seen it should go watch it. It's one of my favorite fights of all time. The Liddell knockout is what's going to get headlines, and it's what changed Rampage from like a good but kind of also ran fighter to now he is an undeniable legend. But the Dan Henderson fight is what takes this to like such an elite year, because beating Chuck Liddell would probably still get you in great, but man, Rampage 2007. Rampage 2007, you look at Rampage's career, before 2007 and after 2007 are miserable. But 2007, he is the best fighter in the world. 2008 is a year that I really struggled to pick a fighter of the year. In my video, I pegged Shinya Aoki. But when I was looking over this, it's like, it's probably Rashad Evans. I don't think anybody really deserves, because this is a bad year. Anderson's 2008 is good. No, it's not. Anderson has the Henderson win and the Cote win and the James Irvin win, which is like, it's fine, but Aoki's year is good. It's good, I think. He loses to Hellboy in extenuating circumstances, but he does beat Jay-Z. He does beat Eddie Alvarez. So they have that kind of, again, little triangle thing going over in Dream, where Hellboy beats Aoki, Aoki beats Alvarez, Alvarez beats Hellboy. I like Aoki's 2008. He was the fighter of the year because he just had so many fights, but Frank Mir 2008 is his big comeback. He beats Brock Lesnar, goes on tough, beats Big Nog. Yeah, I think it's a good year. I think Mir 2008 is a good year that he probably should have fought in the middle of the year, but The Ultimate Fighter is a blight and a curse. GSP 2008 he gets the title back from Matt Serra, and he beats John Fitch. This is fine. It's a fine year. It's not as good as Anderson's, even though John Fitch is like a guy. But GSP is there now. He's arrived after his embarrassing loss to Matt Serra. Miguel Torres in 2008, I think, is going to be the bottom end of good, because bantamweight is a very unestablished division, and Torres comes in, has some great fights, and kind of becomes the face for it in the United States. And even like abroad, there's not really bantamweights doing it big like that. Featherweights had Alexandre Nogueira in Japan, Uriah Faber in America. Bantamweight didn't really have anybody. Torres became the first somebody. Beat Chase Beebe, beat Yoshiro Maeda, which is one of the best fights ever. But yeah, he kind of becomes the first bantamweight that is notable. Rashad Evans, 2008, it's a bad year. If you said Rashad Evans is worthy of being fighter of the year, that's fine, man. I get that. But he gets the Chuck Liddell knockout. He gets the Rampage. He gets the Forrest Griffin knockout. He gets 2 knockouts, becomes the first undefeated UFC champion since Tim Sylvia. But it's a bad year. Like, Anderson is like, he's run of the mill. GSP gets his title back and beats a top contender, but who cares? Aoki's doing well. Mir's doing well. Torres is doing well. This being all the way at the bottom gives the impression that it's not as good. But if you said he's the fighter of the year, he's fine. I wouldn't accept that for GSP or Anderson or Mir or Torres. Maybe for Aoki. But yeah, no, I don't like that. I don't like that he's down here. But he is probably the fighter of the year in a bad year. 2009, one of the best years ever. So many things happening everywhere. Case in point, Bibiano Fernandes. Bibiano Fernandes is a guy that has never really gotten respect from anywhere. Like, because he was in Japan and then he was kind of a pillar for ONE FC as they were starting up. But even in 2009, hardcore MMA fans didn't respect him. There was an old video that the nerds out there will remember. It's like 5 reasons to hate Bibiano Fernandes, made by the KTT forum. And so, like, even when he's doing well in 2009, it's like, well, fuck off, Bibiano. He submits Joe Warren 42 seconds, beats Imanari. He beats Takea in a contentious decision. But he does have a good year. I think he's kind of the only guy doing it big where he's at. But he was doing it big in 2009. Not a lot of stuff popping off in Dream in 2009, but Bibiano was one of them. Fedor 2009. Fedor hasn't had a fight of the year like consideration since 2004, and 2005 was the last time that he got like a really good win. 2006 he beat Mark Hunt, who cares? 2007 he beat Hungman Choi. 2008 he bounced back, beat Tim Sylvia, good for him. But Fedor in 2009 has beaten Andrei Arlovsky, one of the best wins ever, and goes to Strikeforce and beats Brett Rogers. Punches him so hard that Brett Rogers' head comes off and it hits the camera. 2009 Fedor, it is only 2 wins, and he is like one of the only guys doing it big outside. I think it's a good year. GSP 2009 is like right there with him. He gets the BJ Penn win, he gets the Thiago Alves win, and he's like he's super respected, one of the best fighters in the world, one of the biggest stars in the world. The Alves win is huge. The BJ Penn win is very big, but I don't think it's as good as Fedor's 2009. But I always kind of dock people points for like remaining the best versus like reestablishing that they're the best. GSP had a good year in 2008, and it's like his 2009 is better. That's why 2008 is down there and fine. But GSP continuing to be champion is boring to me and my interests. He's not boring in me and my interests. Lyoto Machida, he's actually only got a good year. I like Lyoto Machida's 2009. He goes 3-0. He knocks out Thiago Silva knocks out Rashad Evans, creates the Rashad face, one of the oldest and most archaic memes. But he does rob Shogun, and that makes me sad because Shogun is one of the greatest fighters of all time and my personal hero. If Machida beats Shogun clean, I still don't think that he's fighter of the year, but I think that he goes from good to probably great. Jose Aldo 2009, elite. One of the better years. Beats Mike Brown. Mike Brown's one of the top pound-for-pound fighters. Beats, what's his dumb name? Cub Swanson. I think 2009 is when... 2010 is when he beat Faber, I think. 2009, yeah. 09, Aldo really only has the Swanson and Brown wins. I get them conflated because, like, it's just that Aldo WEC run. Fine, I'll drop it. It's below Vanderlei 01 because Mike Brown is one of the best fighters in the world. Sakuraba was the best fighter in the world, and then Vanderlei knocked him out 2 times. Aldo really only has the Mike Brown win, but that is one of the best wins that has ever happened. It's probably the best win that was gotten in 2009. I'd have to think about it. Maybe Machida over Evans, but Evans wasn't better than Mike Brown in the world. 2010, kind of a transition year, honestly. It's not bad. There are good things that happen, but it's like 2006, where there are great things that happen, but it's very much a transition year between 2005 and 2007. Cain Velasquez in 2010 gets the Nogueira knockout, kind of rebukes the claims that he has pillow hands, then gets the Brock Lesnar finish that a lot of people didn't think that he was going to get because Brock Lesnar endured to survive the onslaught from Shane Carwin, and Cain is so much weaker than Shane Carwin. I think that it is a good year. There's going to be a lot of this, like right in the middle. You know how curves work. Cain's got a good year. It's just that he's not active enough. And God knows that was his problem his entire dumb career. Edgar is also good. Edgar got his 2 wins against BJ Penn. That would be good for a great year because BJ Penn was super dominant champion if both wins were like the second one. The first one is still one of those where it's like it's considered a robbery. I've kind of gone back and forth with it. It's very close regardless. The fight at UFC 118 is one of the biggest blowouts. Also, I was miserable. What a shit night because I paid money to see one of my favorite fighters get their shit pushed in by little Frankie Edgar. Made me mad. Didn't like it. It is a good year. He's just not active enough. 2010 Fighter of the Year is Dominic Cruz, who I think has a great year. 2010 Dominic Cruz, if you haven't seen Dominic Cruz fight in the WEC, he is as special as people say. 2009 was when he moved to bantamweight, I believe. He moved and beat like a bantamweight Ian McCall and beat Joseph Benavidez by just like knee tapping him over and over. But 2010 has 2 of the best performances that have ever been in MMA against Brian Bowles and against Scott Jorgensen. Those fights are demoralizing. You watch those and like he's not destroying them. He kind of actually does destroy Brian Bowles. He doesn't hurt them, like make them like take years off their career. It's just so futile watching them try desperately to land a punch on this man, and it's just not working. It's so demoralizing to watch these fights if you like Scott Jorgensen and Brian Bowles. And then in the middle, he has a rematch with Joseph Benavidez that's super close. I don't remember when I watched it for a project, I don't remember who I gave the decision to, but it's very, very close. So in between 2 of the best performances that have ever happened is a super contentious 5-round decision between the 2 best bantamweights. Cruz 2010 rules. I love Dominic Cruz and would kiss him on the mouth if he let me. 2011 is such a fucked up year because there are so many people who have like amazing years and it kind of just goes out the window. Like Anderson's 2011, Anderson's 2010 was sad as an Anderson fan. He has a Maia fight that nobody enjoyed. Even in hindsight, it's one of those things where people like it as a meme, but if you were there, you have trauma coming from it. A lot of people, Anderson could never rehab his reputation. Then the Chael Sonnen fight kind of ended discussions over perception about how the GSP fight would go, because it was just like, well, GSP would just do that. He just wouldn't get submitted. He's a better wrestler than Chael Sonnen. He wouldn't get submitted. So that's it. So it was over for those conversations about GSP and Anderson Silva. And then Anderson Silva just said, no. So I think it's an elite year, but I'm so biased. Because Anderson Silva was my guy. I picked my side of the fence. And going into the fight with Vitor Belfort, I paid for the pay-per-view. And even though I was a huge fan, I thought I was going into a funeral. Because it's like, well, Chael hurt him. And Vitor is way faster, hits way harder than Chael. I thought I was going in, like, I don't care what the betting odds say. Most people thought Vitor Belfort was going to beat Anderson Silva. It was Vitor's time. And then Anderson just decides, no, I'm the best fighter in the world. I'm going to knock you out in a way that has never been done before. Just going to do that. It's so burned in my brain. I remember every frame of the Vitor Belfort knockout. It's one of, and after that, nobody had any conversations about GSP and Anderson anymore. There were still conversations about, well, could GSP out-wrestle Chael? Could GSP out-wrestle Anderson like Chael did? Could he do blah, 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 blah? Would he be as aggressive? Like, Anderson fans were putting up a fight. And GSP fans put up a fight after the Anderson-Vitor fight. But to the larger world, there was no conversation anymore. Anderson Silva is the best fighter in the world and would be until he lost. It's one of the best years ever in terms of perception, because then he goes on and main events the UFC's return to Brazil, fights Yushin Okami, who is like clearly the number 3, number 4 fighter, had been robbed of a title shot for years, and then goes out and knocks him out easily. It's, in terms of like flipping perception, this is his legacy year. It's not his best year as a pro, but it's up here because of how it's perceived. Everything about Anderson Silva completely shifted in 2011. Michael Chandler in 2011. A lot of people seem to think Michael Chandler is just some dude who wants to fight Conor McGregor. Michael Chandler's been around for a long time. 2011 is his best year. He wins the Bellator lightweight tournament, beats Marcin Held, Patricky Pitbull, then fights Eddie Alvarez, one of the best fights of all time, on the short list, in my opinion, for best fight of all time. Ends up beating Eddie Alvarez, upsetting a top 5 lightweight in what was like his 7th fight, something like that. Never seen anything like it. This is a great year. And to do it outside of the UFC in 2011, as that scene was really shrinking, doing it in Bellator before Bellator blows, unbelievable. Dan Henderson comes back in 2011. Dan Henderson, he gets the knockout over Fejao to become the Strikeforce light heavyweight champion. He goes and knocks out Fedor on my birthday. I remember I was eating cake. I saw Fedor drop Henderson. I looked away to take a bite, and then I looked up and saw Dan Henderson walking away. It's like, wait, what happened? Why did that happen? And then they show the replay, and I'm just flabbergasted. And then Henderson goes to the UFC on the same night that Eddie Alvarez and Michael Chandler fight, November 19th, 2011, has an all-time classic with Shogun and really legitimizes the UFC's decision to make non-title fights 5 rounds. It was the second non-title 5-round fight. The first one was Mark Munoz and Chris Lieben, which was okay. But the Henderson and Shogun fight at UFC 139, I think it was like, it legitimized that decision because it was a fight that Dan Henderson won the first 3 rounds pretty clear. And so it would have just been a 30-27 decision. And then Shogun whoops his ass in rounds 4 and 5, making it like that's what makes it a classic fight, are those 4th and 5th rounds that wouldn't have existed 2 months prior. I think Henderson 2011 is a great year. It is a sensational year. He doesn't have as good of wins as Couture does in 2003, but I think in terms of like perception, in terms of the career renaissance, it's still below Couture 2003. Should I just put Couture 2003 in a great year? I might have to by the end of this. Nick Diaz 2011. This is the Cyborg win. This is the Paul Daly win. He puts Strikeforce on his back, puts on for the city, goes to the UFC, misses the beauty pageant, misses out on the GSP fight, and then goes on to main event with BJ Penn, and only a 3-round fight, unfortunately. But whoops BJ Penn to hell and back, calls out GSP. Where you at, George? Where you at, motherfucker? What great year. I think that, you know what? I'm adding another tier. And this one is only going to have 1 year in it because I don't think it's not fine, but it shouldn't be in good. That's where Diaz goes. That's where Nick Diaz goes. Nick Diaz Army, rise up. Diaz 125. It's my heartbeat. And then, like, what are we doing? I don't like John Jones 2011. He beat all my favorite fighters. I thought for years that the Ryan Bader fight was fixed because Ryan Bader, after getting dominated in wrestling for the entire first round, gets a clinch on Jones and pulls guard. And it's like, well, that's clearly. And then after the fight, it's like, well, Jones is going to go fight Shogun. And it's like, wow, that's clearly fake. Didn't learn until later that, no, Ryan Bader just loses like that. So I had to eat a little bit of humble pie there. Went and beat my favorite fighter, Shogun. Went and beat Rampage. Went and beat Machida. It's one of the best It's one of the best years ever. But he beat all my favorite guys, so fuck him. But it is one of the best years ever. Hate that man. Hate him until the day that he dies. 2012. I like 2012. It doesn't have a lot of like standout amazing fighters, but it's got some good stuff. Anderson Silva's 2012 is one of those where it's like he beats Chael Sonnen and he beats Stephan Bonner. 2 all-time performances, but this is just kind of like Anderson is Anderson at that point. I think it's fine, but Anderson is like, it's really just Anderson reminding people that he is Anderson Silva, and he's the best and he's the coolest and he's so cool and I want to kiss him. Ronda 2012. So I actually had to look it up, and 2012 was not the year that Ronda debuted in the UFC. That was 2013. But 2012, Ronda wins the title, beats Miesha Tate, beats Sarah Kaufman, is like becoming a star outside of the UFC, and ultimately that star power is what convinced the UFC to take on women as an industry, changing like professional sports without ever being in the UFC. Like, that was Ronda's 2012. She is absolutely a tour de force. A lot more in terms of like profile than in wins, because her wins were fine, but I think it's a fine year. It undercuts how like important her year was, but the wins don't support it. But in terms of profile, I think it's a good year. Just don't ask me to defend it. Ben Henderson 2012. I like it. It's probably top of good, because Ben Henderson's 2012, he gets 2 decisions against Frankie Edgar, of which I don't think he deserved either. Everybody kind of acknowledges the second fight is a robbery, and it is. I thought that Frankie Edgar should have won the first fight as well, but Benson kind of takes the air out of that conversation when he faces Nate Diaz later in the year. And I was a guy who thought Nate Diaz was going to dog walk Ben Henderson. I thought he was going to take Ben Henderson out from behind the woodshed, because Ben Henderson was getting his shit boxed up by little teeny tiny Frankie Edgar. Nate Diaz is way longer, and common opponents Jim Miller, Donald Cerrone. Nate Diaz was, again, dog walking them, beating the tar out of those guys. Whereas Ben Henderson, he beat up Jim Miller, but he didn't finish him. He beat Donald Cerrone. He didn't break records on his face. And then, yeah, Ben Henderson beats the shit out of Nate Diaz. It's like 50-43. It's one of the biggest beatdowns that have ever been happened. And I was miserable that night because Shogun fought Gustafsson and lost. BJ Penn came out of retirement and fought Rory McDonald and got embarrassed. Then the main event on Fox was Ben Henderson, Nate Diaz. So those are my guys, and everyone's getting their shit pushed in. That was sad. But Ben Henderson's definitely the fighter of the year. 2013 is a really good year. A lot of it tends to go good year, transition year, good year, transition year. Renan Barão in 2013, he's defending the interim bantamweight championship, would become the undisputed bantamweight champion. Gets the knockout over Eddie Wineland, gets the submission over Michael McDonald. He's fine for this list. It's bordering on good. He's being regarded as one of the best fighters, but he's not quite there yet. I think he gets there in 2014. He just doesn't have as good a year, so it's not going to be reflected. But when he knocks out Faber, it's arguable that he's the best fighter in the world. I don't think he's there, but you could make the argument at the time. Cain Velasquez 2013, if he was more active, he probably takes it. This was the year, I believe that this was the year that he got the Junior Dos Santos rubber match and the Bigfoot rematch. I just don't like Cain because I like those two guys more. It's just not active enough. I don't like these motherfuckers fighting twice a year. That's what happens in this list. I think it's good. Cain kind of wrecked conversations about himself in 2013, for my money, because now you can't go around saying Cain is anything except a destroyer of worlds who took Junior Dos Santos' soul, even though this is Cain's last good year in MMA, and Junior Dos Santos was a top fighter for the next 5 years. Demetrious Johnson 2013, I was a dyed-in-the-wool, staunch Demetrious Johnson hater. Thought he lost to Miguel Torres in 2011, 2012. Thought he should have lost to Ian McCall in 2012. Thought he lost to Benavidez in 2012. I thought he lost to John Dodson whenever that shit happened. I think that might have been 2013. It better not have been. But 2013 is when Demetrious Johnson, he turns the franchise around. So he starts the year beating John Dodson, which I think is a robbery. Then he has the win over John Moraga. And John Moraga, it wasn't great, but in my opinion, Demetrious Johnson had should have lost 3 decisions in a row. And then going back to his Dominic Cruz, which was a loss, and then lose. So I think that, in my opinion, at this point, Demetrious Johnson should be on an 0-5 streak. Unprecedented for a guy who I think is one of the best fighters of all time. So he's on this decision run. Miguel Torres, Dominic Cruz, Ian McCall, Joseph Benavidez, John Dodson. The McCall fight was a draw, but they should have gone to a 4th round. They kind of fucked McCall. He beats McCall handily, but that fight shouldn't exist. I think Benavidez should have won their first fight. I think Dodson should have won their first fight. I think Torres should have won their fight. Should be 5 in a row that he loses. Then he beats John Moraga, kind of turns the franchise around. Gets a submission in the 5th round. Not a lot of those at the time. And then he rematches Joseph Benavidez. I thought Joseph Benavidez was going to beat the shit out of him, because Joseph Benavidez is a better fighter. Just plain and simple. He has a really good run. Joseph Benavidez, he should have beat Dominic Cruz, should have beaten Demetrious Johnson, should be a 2-weight class champion. Was the number 2 bantamweight before moving down, is now the number 2 flyweight by a robbery. Fights Demetrious Johnson, is knocked out in the 1st round. Never gets a rematch, even though he deserved it. Because no one wanted to see that shit. Because he fought Demetrious Johnson, got the rematch, gets knocked out in 2 minutes. Damnedest thing I ever seen. 2013 is when Demetrious Johnson turns the franchise around. It starts with a robbery, has that big pivot point, and then he just starts finishing people. Finishes Chris Carriasso, finishes Kyoji Horiguchi, finishes Henry Cejudo, Wilson Heiss, Ray Borg. He just starts finishing guys. But before that, he should have been 0-5 in decisions. Weidman 2013, he got one win, and it's the best ever. But he got one win. Weidman getting the win over Anderson, being the guy to beat Anderson Silva, is fucked up. I hate that shit. I love Chris Weidman. Love Chris Weidman. I was one of the only people who was saying that Chris Weidman he's the guy to beat Anderson Silva. Didn't think it was going to be at this time, but I was saying that it was close. I was saying this is a 50-50 fight. Way the fight goes, it turned me from a boy to a man. I was in shock for the next 3-4 days. And it's something that has that feeling has never left me. It was like seeing God die is one of the most insane things. And he beats Anderson later in the year, and it's not a leg break, and it's technically 2 wins. I don't like giving people credit for injury victories. Weidman's 2013 is carried so much by it being if it's not the best win ever, it's the second best win ever. Because Anderson Silva is the greatest of all time off of that run. And then Weidman ended it. 2014 has a lot of stuff going on. Jose Aldo has 2 of the best wins ever, Ricardo Lamas and Chad Mendez. I think it is a great year. I'll talk about Aldo later because it kind of factors into the fighter of the year. Dos Anjos 2014. This is when Dos Anjos turns the franchise around. He was a top 5 lightweight in 2013. He'd gotten what many people consider to be a robbery over Evan Dunham and Donald Cerrone. I thought he won both of those fights, but I was a Dos Anjos fan. Then he loses to Khabib. Very competitive, but clearly 3-0. Khabib was just clearly the better fighter. 2014, Dos Anjos beats Jason High. Looks fine. But around this time was when he transitioned to King's MMA, started fighting under Rafael Cordeiro. Takes this time, goes and fights Ben Henderson. Knocks him out. I was the only guy saying that Dos Anjos does everything better than Ben Henderson. Knocks him out first round. Then has a really sad fight against Nate Diaz where he beats the shit out of Nate Diaz. What can you do? But yeah, it's one of the best years of just completely pivoting the perspective, but not becoming the guy. At this point, Dos Anjos is clearly on the path to being special. He would go on to become the lightweight champion by beating Anthony Pettis. Again, one of those best wins ever. Would cement it by beating Donald Cerrone in 2015. It's a really good turning around and becoming a guy that he wasn't really destined to be, but he was too good not to be. Dos Anjos' year is good. Goes 3-0. 2 of them are great performances. Holloway 2014, I don't think it should be on the list. I don't know why he's on here. I understand why it's here, but Max Holloway is this is when Holloway goes from solid young guy to, the white boy might have something. Because this is the year where he knocks out Akira Corsani, blows out Clay Collard, submits Andre Fili, coming off of back-to-back losses in 2013 to Conor and Bermudez. It's just kind of it's a good year. It's like Dos Anjos' year, just on a much lower scale. Dos Anjos went from good fighter who people didn't think much of to, this guy might be something. Holloway went from, okay, he exists to everyone but me, to let's see where he goes. Holloway is 2 years away from contending. Dos Anjos is 1 year away from contending. Ronda 2014. This was the year where Ronda was starting to really ramp up the talk about people were really starting to spread myths about her in her camp. People were saying she's out there, she's knocking out men with body shots, and she's starting to get knockout wins. And everyone said, shut the fuck, because Ronda was modern day Hickson. She was arm barring everybody. She'd had 7 arm bars in a row. It was absurd. And then talk from camp is coming out she's knocking people out with body shots. And everyone's like, shut up, Ronda's camp. And then she fights Sarah McMahon and knocks her out with a knee to the body. And then she fights Alexis Davis and knocks her out in like 16 seconds. I think it was like a judo toss and then punches. But so she went from arm bars to like a couple knockouts. She was clearly she was getting there. Ronda was starting to do it big, and no one was happy about it. Fabricio Werdum in 2014, he beats Mark Hunt for the interim championship, which I love. I love that Mark Hunt got to have that opportunity, but I loved the fight. But the Travis Brown fight, the Werdum versus Travis Brown, is probably in my top 3 favorite non-title fights ever. It's pretty important, all things considered. Travis Brown was the favorite in that fight. He was next up. It's easy to forget because Travis Brown is a big doofus that nobody likes now. But Travis Brown at the time was Himothy Hims. He'd knocked out Alistair Overeem and Josh Barnett before everybody knew that was easy because Ben Rothwell then did it. Mark Hunt and Travis Brown are 2 really great performances by Werdum. It showed that he is like transforming from silly man into like legitimate great fighter. But I think that it's fine. It's not as good as Dos Anjos' 2014. But it's like probably going to be around the top. It's not as good as Crow Cops either. It's whatever. I'll order this later. I keep saying that. TJ Dillashaw, back in 2014, completed his transition into the worst guy. And one of my least favorite things that Conor McGregor ever did was make people hate TJ Dillashaw. Because everyone else hated him for the wrong reasons. Oh, rat. Oh, you rat. I didn't like TJ Dillashaw because his vibes were putrid. But he just decided in 2014, I'm going to be one of the best fighters in the world. Like, he was on a 4-fight win streak. That's the story of his career. 4-fight win streak. Lost to Rafael Sunsao. A lot of people think it was a robbery. I did not. But I am a Sunsao fan, and I don't like Dillashaw. Goes to fight Mike Easton and is completely different. Just has a completely different style. He starts doing that, the neo footwork. He's doing the toe tapping and punching. Wins that fight easily. Goes and fights Renan Barão. Has one of the best, if not the best, performances in the sport's history. Everybody knows that's one of the biggest wins of all time. Goes and then beats Joe Soto in the last fight of the year. I'm a big sucker for 3 wins in a year. It's kind of the magic number because I was a child of the propaganda. UFC, best fight the best 3 times a year. But the reason why his 2014 is over Aldo in 2014, who I think had, if you're ranking their 5 wins, Dillashaw has the best win in Barão, and then also the 4th and the 5th. Aldo Mendez 2 and Aldo Lamas are way better wins. And so you put those 2 together. Is it better than Barão's? Maybe. But Dillashaw's win in 2014 against Renan Barão made people think of the Aldo fight differently. Because this was the year where, 2013 was when Team Alpha Male started to turn the ship around. Chad Mendes became a knockout puncher. Uriah Faber went on a career run. Dillashaw finally achieved the goal and won a championship. And then when he knocks out Barão, who is Jose Aldo's teammate, Jose Aldo thought is it over? Is it over for Nova União? And even though Jose Aldo would say no and beat Chad Mendes in one of the best fights of all time, Dillashaw, his impact it affected how people saw Aldo in 2014. And so even though I think that Aldo has 2 great wins while Dillashaw has 1 all-time great win, it's still, I would give it to Dillashaw over him. 2015 is another one of those, like 2011, where there is a fighter of the year, and I don't like it, but there's so many great years. Daniel Cormier has a good year in 2015. He has the loss to John Jones, which sucks. But then he beats Rumble Johnson and Alexander Gustafsson. Gustafsson should have beat him. Should have been 1-2 on the year, and Gustafsson should have a championship. But no one respects my judging. He rebounded well after the Jones loss to become a very respected figure. Joanna and Jacek in 2015. That is an elite year. Joanna comes out of the caves of Poland, jagged rocks, beats the tar out of Carla Esparza, beats the tar out of Jessica Penne, and then has kind of a boring fight against, I think, Valerie Letourneau. But fuck it. Those two fights, Esparza and Penne, I was like, this is unreal. This is an animal. This is a monster. And I was right. I was right to think that. Luke Rockhold, 2015, completes his punished Rockhold run after losing to, I think it's a great year. Completes his punished Rockhold run because he came into the UFC really hyped up, got knocked out by steroided up Vitor. And then he goes on this just run where he's killing people. Knocks out Costa Philippou, destroys Tim Bosch, wipes Michael Bisping. He only gets 2 wins in 2015, which is an embarrassment of Lyoto Machida. And then a really sloppy fight against Chris Weidman, but he is the guy to end up beating Chris Weidman. So he has this just run that culminates in 2015. Fortunately, it wouldn't last because God hates me. But I think that Rockhold in 2015 is not as concise as not as tight as you'd want him to be, but he's great. He has a great year in 2015. Ronda Rousey in 2015 is so fucked because she goes from, at the start of the year, the Kat Zingano win, which got huge on Vine and Twitter and blew her up into a comical star. Then she has the fight against Bethe Correia, where Bethe Correia tells her not to cry and kill herself. And then Ronda knocks her out. And that gets huge on Vine. So 2015 is the Ronda year. Good and bad. Because then she loses the home fight and is basically ousted from the sport because she takes it so badly. If Ronda beat Holly Holm, she's up here. This is a god year. Because perception, this was when Ronda was at her peak. This is when Ronda became Ronda and industries had to shift because of her. But this is such a fucked year. You know what? I gotta do it. That's where Ronda goes. Because it was the highest highs and then the lowest lows. If you want perception, Conor and Ronda were the biggest things. People will claim that Conor felt bigger. He did not. They're just in MMA and they don't know things. But Conor was everywhere, dude. In 2015, that's McGregor mania. That's an unreal moment in time. And I hate it. There are so many people who are like, this is my favorite time period. Fuck me. I loathed 2015. I hated Conor McGregor. And he will ride 2015 until the day that he dies because he never had a good thing ever happen in his dumb career again. He's actually kind of here. He got one win, and it sucked. But you have to acknowledge it. He also got the Chad Mendes win, which is short notice. I don't count it. It's my least favorite great year, and it should be way higher. And he's clearly the fighter of the year, but I hate that shit. And if I had one wish, I'd wish it away. 2016 is a good year because there are a lot of things happening. I don't like all of the things, but I like the things happening. Bisping 2016, he hits that magic number, that 3 wins that makes my panties wet. The hoax of the people. I hate Bisping's 2016, dude. People, I hate that I have to acknowledge this fucking idiot as a legend because of 2016. Because he got an Anderson Silva win, that's a hoax. He got a Dan Henderson title defense, that's a hoax. And he gets a Luke Rockhold win because he steps in on 6 days' notice and Luke Rockhold doesn't give a shit. Because Luke Rockhold killed him a couple of years prior when they were both prepared and focused. And now I have to pretend like Bisping was cool for going into the post-fight press conference and talking shit after the game. I have to pretend like he's a legend who finally got what was coming to him? Fuck no. I hate Michael Bisping. It's fuck Michael Bisping and anybody that love him until the day that I die. I hate Michael Bisping. 2016 is a hoax because 2 of those wins are bullshit, and the one that is real is the most bullshit of all, just in a different way. Amanda Nunes's 2016 is really good. I think this is a great year. Amanda Nunes 2016 goes from she is a very good fighter for a round and a half, which she had been since Strikeforce, to she only needs a round and a half to beat people. She narrowly pulls out a decision over Valentina Shevchenko. And I think that fight's good. She loses the 3rd round pretty wide, but she does win those first 2 rounds. And then she goes up and fights Miesha Tate. Main event's UFC 200. Everyone's read on the fight was Miesha Tate wins if the fight reaches the 3rd round, because Nunes is going to gas out and Miesha Tate has the guts and the gumption. And they were right, but Amanda Nunes didn't let it last that long because she just killed her. And then she killed Ronda at the end of the year. The Ronda wins, whatever, but it's a great year for Nunes. It's one of her best years. I think it's her best year, like in terms of sports, but in terms of perception, she didn't get there for a while. Dominic Cruz 2016 is like my baby. He does lose at the end to Cody Garbrandt, but when he came back against TJ Dillashaw, it's like that fight's so made up. Like, if you put that fight in a movie where a guy has been out for years, unable to fight for the championship, and then wins the championship that he never lost, with all the story threads that went into it, with the Team Alpha Male and TJ Dillashaw's status having left Team Alpha Male, it's like a story. It's magic. It's a magical journey. Then he goes on and beats Uriah Faber, because I remember the post-fight, like, at the desk, because it was a Fox show for Dillashaw. They go to the desk, and Cruz is so happy. It's like, I'm so happy to be back, to have won the championship that he never lost. And then it's like, well, we got a message for you. And it's Uriah Faber being like, well, we still have some business there, but check the record, bud. And it cuts back, and Dominic Cruz's face has sunk, and he's like, why am I still dealing with this? Why am I still like this? Why do I have to keep talking about Uriah Faber? Why hasn't he gone away? And it's a silly thing that he faced Faber again, because Faber didn't really deserve it. But UFC 199 fight is Dominic Cruz takes him out behind the woodshed and whoops him. And I love it. And then the Garbrandt fight, it's like, well, Faber got the last laugh because he trained the guy that beats Dominic Cruz. And that it's such an amazing meeting. It's one of the best story fights ever. Cruz 2016 it's a magical storybook year. The wins aren't there. He does lose at the end, but I think it is one of those magical years. Like, probably one of the last, like, truly magic years that just, like, the stories are just too far. They're out of this world. 2016 Fighter of the Year is Stipe Miocic. He had a in my opinion, dog trash win over Andrei Arlovsky at the start of the year, which Andrei Arlovsky was like the 2nd ranked heavyweight in the world, which is ridiculous. He goes in and beats Verdum in kind of like a flat knockout in Brazil, then beats Alistair Overeem in one of the silliest, memeiest ways. I think it's probably up here with great year. I don't think it's up here as an elite year. In terms of wins, it is. Arlovsky was great. Arlovsky was good. Verdum was great. Overeem was great. I think I'm just being a dick. It does belong here, but, like, the vibe is off. I didn't like the vibe of Stipe. And, like, I liked Stipe. I was a fan of Stipe, but I didn't like the vibes because he was winning in silly, memey ways. I didn't like it. 2017 is a bizarre year. In my video, I gave the Fighter of the Year to Kyoji Horiguchi because I forgot about Demetrius Johnson. And it was a very sentimental pick. But like, Holloway fights twice. He beats Aldo twice. The Aldo fight is great, but the second one is like, All right, you know, I gotta change this. And you know what? I'll be fair. I'll move Conor. I'll move Conor up to here, and he'll go right there. Holloway, he gets one of the best wins ever, but then the second one is like, he got one win. The other one I don't really rate. Horiguchi 2017 is good. He doesn't beat anyone near the caliber that anybody else on this list beats, besides maybe Demetrius Johnson. But he went like 7-0 on the year. He beats up really good flyweight Yuki Matoya, moves up to bantamweight, knocks out Shintaro Ishiwatari, knocks out Gabriel Oliveira, beats up Manel Cape. It's a good year. It really kind of redefines Horiguchi's future, but it's actually only fine. I love Horiguchi 2017 and wish I could pitch it any other way. I think that he's on the track to being one of the best fighters in the world, but he's not there yet. And he would never get there in the eyes of most people, but those people weren't watching Ryzen. Woodley 2017. Woodley 2017's got to go here. I hated this guy. I hated these fights. Maya, Wonderboy 2. Oh my God. Woodley's 2017 was so sinister. Woodley should probably be, like, in terms of wins, should maybe be fighter of the year, but he's only got the 2 and they sucked. Oh my God, the Stephen Thompson fight it sucked so bad that it was funny. The Maya fight was so bad. If he got one more fight, then maybe, but it would be held back by the fact that I watched these. It's not like I'm researching them. I watched them, and so the vibes are terrible. You know, I don't like the implication here that below the jail, that means I'm going to kill him. The vibes are bad. They're just bad vibes. I don't like it. 2017 Demetrius Johnson, I don't know what to think about it, because he doesn't have a lot of good wins. He has Wilson Heist and he has Ray Borg. But he breaks the title defense record and makes up a meme submission to beat Ray Borg with. What do you do with that information? What am I supposed to do with that? It's just like, like, it's good, but you know what? I got to do it to him. More people will go in here because 2014 Ronda is also there. But yeah, like, the resume is not there for 2017 Demetrius Johnson, but the vibes were there. He breaking records, breaking ways to win MMA fights. He was just making things up at that point. 2018 is potentially the last good year of MMA in this reviewer's humble opinion. And I think that can be seen in the contenders for Fighter of the Year. Kyoji Horiguchi's 2018 rules. I love Kyoji Horiguchi's. It was easy to ignore Kyoji Horiguchi in 2017 because he was fighting regional champions and stuff like that. But if you were watching Kyoji Horiguchi in 2018, he might be the best fighter in the world, bro. Like, he fights Ian McCall, knocks him out in like 6 seconds. He fights Hiromasa Ojikubo, who was the Shudo champion, I think. Or maybe the Pancrase champion. I don't remember which. But Hiromasa Ojikubo, in drama-filled bout, won at Ryzen 11, one of the greatest events that's ever happened. And then Horiguchi on New Year's Eve faces Bellator bantamweight champion Darian Caldwell, is taken down and held against the ropes for 3 rounds, and then pulls out a submission, and I lose my mind. I could have burned my house down when he beat Caldwell, dude. Dude, boy, that Caldwell win in 2018 hit like crack. Khabib 2018 is fine. A lot of people would put this way higher, but he beats Conor in the big defining legacy win. He beats Ally Quinta. I don't rate Ally Quinta, and I don't rate Conor McGregor in 2018. You know what? No, the vibes are bad. The vibes were bad for Khabib in 2018. I was up on Khabib because I was so down on Conor. But good God, are the vibes putrid in hindsight? Because this is when Khabib fans really started popping up, and I don't like those motherfuckers. Nunes 2018 rules. I think that Nunes only has 2 fights. She has the Pennington fight that apparently happened. I'm not going to pretend like I saw the Amanda Nunes Raquel Pennington fight. I had a job at the time. But I did see that Nunes faced Chris Cyborg. And when Nunes faced Chris Cyborg, you want to talk about a cultural reset. It completely changed the entire course of women's MMA. You don't have to talk about Cyborg is clearly the best women's fighter of all time. You could start talking about Nunes. And the crazy thing about it is, like, it was just this insane 50-50. Like, for a lot of people, the way that you beat Cyborg is you go into it and you have to, like, take her down, get her tired, gas her out because she's so big and muscular. Nunes said, no, I'm going to walk her down and we are going to exchange punches until one of us dies. And that night it was Cyborg. Bars, metal, awesome. But the best fighter of 2018 is Daniel Cormier. And this is an elite year. 2017, he has that loss to John Jones, which doesn't count. Check the record. So he remains the light heavyweight champion. Starts the year by beating Volkan Oezdemir. A lot of people thought Cormier was done. A lot of people were crowning Volkan Oezdemir. I didn't. I believed in Daniel Cormier. But then Daniel Cormier is scheduled to fight Stipe Miocic. And I am of the opinion that Stipe Miocic is going to kind of beat up on Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier doesn't really like striking at a distance. Stipe is kind of good at that. Stipe keeps winning for some reason. I don't know why Stipe keeps winning, but he does. And then Daniel Cormier knocks him out. Round 1, bitch. Again, in my opinion, and it didn't change the conversation around him, but it should have, because John Jones held a shadow over Daniel Cormier for his entire lightweight run. So even though he was getting wins over Rumble, over Gustafsson, John Jones's shadow was lingering because John Jones got the win over him. And then they had a fight, and then John Jones won. And Cormier cried. So Cormier at light heavyweight was always going to be John Jones's number 2. But John Jones didn't move up to heavyweight until way later, and I don't count that. Because at the time, in 2018, Daniel Cormier moved up to fight the best heavyweight champion that the UFC has ever had. Goes in there, looks him in the eyes, and knocks him out round 1. To me, it should have completely changed the conversation around John Jones and his legacy, because Daniel Cormier went up and did that shit, whereas John Jones had talked about it for 5 years. And then to add insult to injury, Daniel Cormier does go into Madison Square Garden very shortly later and ankle pick Derek Lewis. The Derek Lewis fight is okay. The win is okay, but it's one of those that I think is like, it's just cherry on top. The Oezdemir gets it back of the win column. The Stipe is a career definer. The Lewis, it's just like you've hit a perfect 3 title fights on the year. Now we get into the years where there are good performers, but nah. 2019, Kamaru Usman goes in, beats Tyron Woodley, then beats Colby Covington. It's a good year. Bordering on a great year, but I don't think it gets there. Why though? Why doesn't it get there? Maybe it's because it's just two fights, and I don't like the 2 fights. But I think I just really do like guys who fight more than 2 times. Because Usman gets a great win and then beats Colby Covington, who on paper is a great win. I never respected Colby Covington, but people did, and that fight was good in theory. It's probably up here. It didn't feel like it was up here at the time. And that's, I think, what I'm going off of. It's hard to be objective as it goes, like, closer and closer because, like, my personal feelings are getting involved. Alexander Volkanovski 2019 gets the Aldo win, gets the Holloway win. They're 2 good wins. It's probably also a great year for him. But there's not a lot to say. At this time, there wasn't really a lot to say about Volk. It's like, oh, okay, he's winning fights. Good for him. I don't know. Adesanya 2019. I think this is an elite year. It might be down in great, but this year, again, hits that magic 3 number. Beats Anderson Silva at the start of the year in a very respectful display towards the legend. Then he beats Kelvin Gastelum, all-time war. Kind of galvanizes his perspective for a lot of people. And then he beats Robert Whittaker, who like laid a brick in his pants and couldn't deal with it. And just sprinted at him and died in front of a stadium. So Adesanya is definitely up here in 2019. I think Adesanya, he has one of the better years, but they're starting to get worse. 2020 is the start of when MMA just starts getting like really putrid and you have to start hoping for big years. Like 2020, Adesanya in 2020, he has 2 fights, I think. He has the Romero fight and he has the Paulo Costa fight. And that's fine. No one liked the Romero fight except for me. But I like shit. And the Paulo Costa fight, he gets the knockout. Good for him, I guess. I to be clear, I thought Paulo Costa was going to beat him because I thought Izzy was just like a bullshit finesse fighter. I thought Paulo Costa could take shots from Yoel Romero and keep on coming. But you know, I overrated Paulo Costa. That's on me. Jan Blachowicz 2020, he's like the only guy doing it big where he's at. He's like the last one who can go there. Because Jan in 2020, he gets the Corey Anderson win, and then he gets the Dominic Reyes win. And those are good wins, but kind of who cares? Like what does that shit matter to me in my life? He beat Dominic Reyes. That was cool at the time, but it was mostly just because he got that John Jones bump. It's fine. But like light heavyweight was so dead that you're just like, oh my god, a new person. People thought it was going to be Dominic Reyes, but it turns out it was Yan. Deiveson Figueiredo, I think, is pretty easily the fighter of the year for 2020 in that he's like the only person who had a good year with multiple fights. 4 fights in the year. Has the 2 Benavidez fights. First fight, beats him up. Second fight, more horrific than the first. Beats Alex Perez, 2-minute guillotine, and then has a really great draw with Brandon Moreno at the end of the year. He has exciting fights. He has good performances. He's up there in 2020. He's like the only guy to have like a good, comprehensive year. Guy who fought beginning to like Usman only fought Masvidal. Khabib only fought Gaethje. Gaethje went 1-1, beating Ferguson, losing to Khabib. It just wasn't like... there just wasn't shit happening. Like, Henry Cejudo was going around doing shit, and I didn't like it. 2020 was a bad year. Speaking of bad years, 2021 is like maybe marginally better than 2020, but it's not by a lot. Charles Oliveira was a guy that I refused to accept was actually good until the very end of 2021 when he beat Dustin Poirier. Because when he beat Poirier, I was like, okay, he's like real. He's a real boy. Because he beat Ferguson, it's like, okay, that's cool. Oh no, when he beats Kevin Lee, I said, okay, he's good, but he does this all the time. He'll have a good fight and then lose to Paul Felder. And then he beat Tony Ferguson before we knew that was easy. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe. And then he beats Michael Chandler to become the interim lightweight champion. And I was like, huh, isn't that interesting? He got dominated round 1 and then came out round 2, drops him immediately, and beats Chandler. TKOs him. And so it was like, oh, he might actually be real, but Dustin Poirier is the best fighter at lightweight. Like, I don't even need to see that fight. Just give Dustin Poirier the belt. The only reason why it was Chandler and Oliveira was because Poirier said no, he's going to go fight Conor McGregor. And then Oliveira faced Poirier and Oliveira won. And it's like, I think the vibes are high, but the resume is not. But I don't know, because Chandler was he wasn't really on a run. He'd beaten Hooker. Poirier's a great win. I think the vibes are high. Because I started believing in Oliveira again. And then he missed weight for Gaethje. And then he crucified Gaethje. So, 2021 Kamaru Usman is like, it's good. But he clearly became the best fighter in the world. But I don't think that he had a great year, if that makes sense. Like, he beats Gilbert Burns. He beats... Oh, wait. Was the Covington fight in 2021? Because if it was, then I'm wrong. I think it was. Yeah, no, this is a good year. No, this is a great year for Kamaru Usman. I was wrong. I thought the Covington fight was like start of 2022. So a Gilbert Burns knockout, Jorge Masvidal knockout, Colby Covington where he wins 4 rounds to 1, but Covington lost to him the best, so we got to respect him. I don't respect Colby Covington as a win or a person or a fighter or anything, but no, that's a great year for Kamaru Usman. Clearly the best fighter in the world. Would lose that status before he lost to Leon Edwards, but clearly the best fighter in the world for me. 2022 is a solid year. It's actually really bad. But Patricia Pitbull was doing it big. 2022 is when Patricia Pitbull was like, hey guys, I'm still here. I was here 10 years ago and I'm still here. I am still here as well. 2021... Pitbull lost the title to AJ McKee in the Bellator featherweight tournament and like got submitted round 1 and kind of just like it seemed like, oh, he passed the baton. AJ McKee is going to be him and he's going to climb the ladder to success. And then Pitbull and McKee had a rematch that nobody asked for and probably shouldn't have happened. But then Pitbull beats him. That's surprising. I think Pitbull goes 4-0 on the year, but the McKee fight is his best win. And that's cool. The vibes are high, the resume is not. I am willing to accept that spot for Pitbull. Because 2022, there's this abhorrent year, sir. Terrible year. The vibes were putrid. Islam Makhachev. Man, get the fuck out of my face. You beat Charles Oliveira. You beat fucking Bobby Green. What are you looking at me for? The fact that Islam Makhachev has a thing here means that the year is terrible. You know what? No, go down there. The year's bad, bro. Your vibes aren't even good. The vibes are bad. Volk 2022. He beats Korean Zombie. He beats Max Holloway, and then he doesn't do shit for the rest of the year. I think it's good. The performances are there. You know what? The vibes were good. The resume is not. And even though those are two fan favorite fighters, the performances were so good that it's clear he's the best fighter in the world and that he's the fighter of the year because the conversation felt circulated around Volkanovski. But the resume just isn't there. And this tier might get a lot bigger once I comb through all of these. 2022 might be worse than 2023. But the fact that stupid Islam Makhachev is like, I don't even know who else could be the fighter of the year for 2023. Like, he just has two. The vibes are bad. It's a bad year. The vibes are terrible. Because, like, you beat Volkanovski 2-time. And it's like, good for you. But get a job. Get away from her. Grow up. I don't like Islam Makhachev, and so maybe I'm biased. Maybe people really people really come for that Volkanovski rematch because, like, oh, he silenced the talk and he really proved it. He beat a featherweight. Shut up. How are you gonna have 4 good wins in your career and 2 of them are against a 40-year-old featherweight? Useless. Alex Pereira in 2023, he beats Jan Blachowicz, beats Yuri. I think 2023 is also he lost to what's his dick? Izzy. Maybe that might have been the previous year. But he does move up. He does go into another weight division. And yeah. I think that he has a good year. I'm trying to think about if I missed anybody for 2023. Sean Strickland got 2 terrible wins and then beat Israel Adesanya. And it's like, I don't give a goddamn about Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland got 2 abhorrent wins, got a false fight against Izzy and had like a great performance. And now we have to pretend like stupid Sean Strickland is a guy. I can't think of anybody who should be here besides Sean Strickland in 2023 and Semi Schilt for 1998. I don't know if I missed anybody, but I need to go through my tiers and order them. Cruz 2016 is like, it's got to be like, the vibes are there. Vibes are high. The resume is solid, but it's much more magical than it is good. That's where Cruz 2016 goes. This is actually a really good tier list. I'm happy with where it came out. I wish I was dead. I wish I didn't do it, but I am happy with where it came out. So let's see where it all ended up. We did it, gang. We made a tier list of MMA fighters and their best years ever. The best years ever compiled on a list. I'm never doing this again. No one will watch this, and no one's going to get this far. This was too long. If you've gotten here, you shouldn't have watched it. And if you click to the end, you're a bad person.